right, folks, it's 3 against 1 here about how we read what happened with the primetime show trial that we heard last night, broadcast by all the broadcast networks except Fox, about and starring Liz Cheney and the chair. And what they did was try to make the case that Trump should, I guess, be banned forever from American politics and maybe put in jail. So with us is Kent Garrett, John Woodford, and Bryant Thomas. You know them from our other podcasts. So we will start with their assessment of why they think that Liz Cheney was stellar. Kent, why don't you start?
Well, I thought she really presented the facts in sort of a very calm, very intellectual way. I thought the whole thing was produced very well. I mean, with the short sound bites, I thought it was very smart that they dealt with the big lie right off, and from there went on to. And I think they made the point that the January 6th riot or insurrection. It's just part of it, and I think they were successful in making the point that there's a big, larger conspiracy that started much earlier than January 6th. I think she was successful in doing that. And so I think it was a good night for, and again, I think Fox not showing it was a mistake.
I agree with that. So John, what do you think?
Well, I think that shows that they not only are cowards, but they are complicit. They were complicit in the false narrative, and they respond by saying that what was done yesterday on the TV was just a narrative. This is a magic word. It's supposed to make people think that it's all make-believe. But Liz Cheney, the first thing she started was she quoted Trump himself. So I don't call that a show trial myself. She quoted him this way: "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long." This is what Trump tweeted while it's going on.
All right.
And of course, so Trump is the big lie. The big lie that he used, of course, is that an election was stolen from him. And he also, before that, he and the people around him, they used their media flunkies to bring all these people. Many of them, you saw how nutty they were in their assault on men and women guarding the Capitol. And they showed them, those weren't make-believe videos. We saw what they did. We saw how they, I'm glad they put the young woman that they attacked there and knocked out. And so those people defended the Capitol the best they could against people. We saw what they were. You could hear them. You could see them. So I would say anyone who found those people attractive, honorable, patriotic, you can see the kind of mentality that led to a formation of similar gang type assaults in fascist countries where that type took over and their politics took over. So I think Liz Cheney spelled out what's afoot. We don't want a country where that's the way things happen after an election. Okay. We don't want a government coming in that's on the shoulders of that kind of people, because they, as they say, they want to murder opponents, they want to hang them, they want to stick them in jail, and so I thought it was a very well done presentation of what's at stake for our country. And I mean, you can say Trump made the economy good. That's like praising Hitler for having the trains running on time.
That was Mussolini. Hitler.
Mussolini. Excuse me, Mussolini. Yeah, another.
Hitler.
My fascist.
Another beauty.
Hitler, the Volkswagen. But anyway.
Yeah, he got the highways built.
Everything that you said about.
He lowered unemployment.
It was largely true what you said about everything that you laid out. However, largely irrelevant. Now, in terms of Liz Cheney being so honest and logical and intellectual, That tweet that she quoted from Trump, which you also quoted yourself at the beginning of this broadcast, what she left out was the ending line, which was, quote, Trump saying, "Go home with love and in peace." Now, if she is so fair about this, why would she purposely omit that line?
She
Well,
didn't say it, but it was put on the
It
screen.
was on the screen, Larry.
But why didn't she say it? She covered herself. Well, it was on the screen, but she was going on and on about how awful Trump was, about his tweet, this and that. Why leave out that line? That was indicative of how they were stacking the deck. None of this would hold up in the court of law. You know, they're trying to hang him with.
Well, it's not a court of law. That's what you got to remember.
You've got to hang him. They're trying to hang him with the actions of the Proud Boys and the
plausible deniability is what Trump was attempting to pull off.
as if he was directing the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, which he was not.
They came there in response to his call to them. They did that earlier through their media and everything else. How did those people have to come there? They thought they were coming to support Trump, who told them that the election was being stolen from them.
They came there to protest, to make their concerns known. He didn't tell them to riot. He didn't tell them to break into the Capitol. In fact, if you really analyze the videos, which they did not show, there were cops ushering the people in. I think what happened was, and don't forget, this Ray Epps guy, who is clearly on tape, agitating the crowd, urging them to go in and stirring them up. He hasn't been arrested. He hasn't been investigated thoroughly. He's off the radar. Yeah, that's just one indication of these people that were in the crowd, agitating that crowd. I think what happened was, call me a conspiracy nut, but I think really what happened was, when they saw Trump was bringing people in for the rally, they figured this was an opportunity to stir up the crowd and get some of the more radical people in the crowd to go wild, which they did, and then hang it on Trump for an impeachment. Trump didn't direct this. He wasn't calling for violence.
Oh, come on, Larry. Come on.
Show me where he was calling for violence.
Look, he rabble-roused that crowd just before they walked from where he was speaking down to the Capitol. He stirred them all up. He gave them their marching orders. And one thing I'd like to say about Liz Cheney is the same thing that I've been telling you all along about Republican support for Trump being blind. Sooner or later, Donald Trump is not going to be a player in politics. And every Republican who has saluted him all along so blindly is going to have to explain that. And they're going to say, "Oh, well, we really didn't mean it. No, he was just a force we had to deal with." Nonsense. That's the real BS.
And Trump knew
everybody has to know that.
Right. And Trump knew the allegations of the stolen election were false all along.
That's debatable. That is high.
It's not debatable. Barr told him.
Yeah. He knew it. He knew it. It didn't make any difference to him.
I don't think, this is my position, which has been all along. I don't know if the election was stolen. However, I do know that none of that evidence was thoroughly examined. It was thrown out of court. They always trumpet those court cases. Oh, they were thrown out of court. They were thrown out of court before the evidence could be examined. It could be presented or it could be entered. They were dismissed on timing, on lack of standing, et cetera, et cetera. So you cannot conclude that the election was not stolen. I'm not saying that it is, but the evidence was never thoroughly examined.
Okay, listen.
All you're doing is repeating. Barr told Trump that the claims of the election were false, that it was stolen. He said that's not true, and that's why he turned against Barr.
So Barr,
that's why he turned against his own daughter and son. That's why he turned against Pence.
So Barr is the final authority then. He knows definitely.
I mean, come on. I think he has a bit more integrity, at least, than Trump.
Look, all these guys, including Trump, are political players. It's hard to find where the truth lies. I don't accept the truth from Barr or anybody else without question.
Barr, you question Trump, except Trump, I guess.
No, I just said that Trump is a player too. But let's look at what really.
And what's he playing? What game is he playing?
Well, let me back you up, Larry. And if indeed many of these legal challenges to the vote counts were dismissed out of hand without adequate review of the information that was part of those part of those requests, then what about reviewing it on appeal? If it was so egregious, if the behavior was so egregious in those dismissals of those vote challenges, why weren't they reversed on appeal?
Why did he call Georgia?
You obviously don't understand how the legal process works. You can't get an appeal presented if the judge has already struck down certain points. You can't even enter some things for an appeal depending on how the original court case judgment goes. In Pennsylvania, where I live, they changed the mail-in balloting permission at the last minute. Now, the legislature, by constitution in Pennsylvania, has the right to determine the way the vote is carried out. The state legislature was overruled by the governor and by the attorney general, Josh Shapiro, who is now running for governor himself. So this was how the court system was shaped for their end. So don't tell me, that the court system is fair and it's the final word, and how come none of the courts did, they rig stuff all the time. You know how clever lawyers could be on both sides. So
state legislatures rig things too. There are players inside the state legislatures that try to rig situations to suit their parties and to suit their movements inside these parties.
And what about Giuliani losing his law license? Come on. This is not an accident. He did things that were egregiously illegal.
That also is to be determined. You look, what you're hearing is the conclusions, the interpretations of the mainstream media. They're not the final word on all of this either. In terms of John, what you said about state legislators also trying to manipulate things, that is true. But what I'm saying is, at least in Pennsylvania, with which I'm familiar, the state legislature was supposed to have the final word. They were overruled by the governor and the attorney general, which is unconstitutional under the Pennsylvania Constitution. There are all kinds of things going on like that during the election. So again, I'm not saying that the election was stolen, but I'm saying there is no final determination on that could be accurate because the evidence was never presented. Anyway, getting back to Liz Cheney's performance. Look, she was also the one, she and other Rhino Republicans and Democrats especially didn't say boo during the riots in 2020 in the big cities where 2,000 police officers were injured and there was $2 billion worth of damage. Those riots were okay. Kamala Harris was saying, we're going to continue it. It should be continued, et cetera, et cetera. Now these
people are a Rhino Republican. That's what the Trumpites, that's the term that the right-wing Republicans call Republicans who don't go along with the right wing of their party.
No, I'm using the term specifically for some of them who are pretty much on board with the Democratic rhetoric, especially in terms of what was going on.
Well, then you're just a partisan of that.
No, you're just trying to.
You said you're a Democrat, but it sounds to me like you're just a partisan for that element in the Republican Party.
I'm not a partisan.
That calls other Republicans, moderate Republicans, they call them rhinos.
I'm not a partisan for either side. What I'm trying
to call them a rhino?
I'm calling them the rhinos because I'm accepting that term as applied to some of them because they didn't object to any of these things that were going on. So you're just aligning yourself with the Trump. I'm not aligning myself with Trump.
Come on, that's Trump terminology.
Look, how am I aligning myself with Trump? By pointing out that these guys didn't raise one word against all the rioting that was going on in the summer of 2020. They didn't say adjourn. And here's another thing. They're so concerned.
Well, what's that got to do with the vote?
What's that got to do with this?
Because we're talking about people manipulating things and shading things, for their own narratives. That's what's going on here. If Liz Cheney is so concerned about justice and the preservation of the American way and the Constitution, how come she and nobody else and Merrick Garland hasn't enacted the existing federal law that prohibits demonstrations in the houses of judges? Kavanaugh, the guy who allegedly was out to assassinate Kavanaugh, there was not even a mention of that. with any of these people who are so concerned
When
about.
are they supposed to mention it? Where would they mention
Well,
it?
first of all the hearings are not done yet. So,
And it could be that they're alarmed that because when a president is doing this sort of thing, it's a worse situation than when screwballs of either the left or right on the lower level are doing it. When a president is involved with it, that's when it's time for people to get alarmed.
Okay, but specifically when a president, namely Trump, is involved with what?
egging people into violence.
Trying to throw out election based upon what he says, where even his top advisors are saying what you're saying is not the truth. They have to then resign or leave because he's overturning an election, and we've always prided ourselves, at least, on the peaceful transference of power through elections. He had no evidence. He's never presented. He called up Georgia and other places trying to lean on people to find him votes in various states to throw the election the other way. And they kept coming back and saying there's no evidence for that. These were people even who were Republicans.
When he said, find me the votes, what he meant was find votes that were uncounted, cast aside, found in boxes.
What he meant?
He didn't care how they got the
He
votes.
didn't care. Is that what he meant?
He didn't
That's
say
right.
that.
You know.
He didn't
But
care
what I'm
how.
saying is that there were all kinds of discrepancies with the voting. Places shut down and then resumed for no apparent reason. Then more mail-ins came in. Then they were finding mail-ins cast aside, votes cast. There were all kinds of things. Now, all they would say is, well, yeah, that happened, but not enough to change the results of the election. It was never thoroughly investigated. That's all I'm saying.
Why don't we investigate that? We might as well call for investigations for all the practices in the country that make it hard, that impede people's right to vote or their ease of voting. The Republicans have persistently tried to make it hard for people to vote and to limit the voting, cut down the number of the voters as much as possible in state after state, and this is the result. So we might as well, why not look at that too?
Are you talking about the so-called Jim Crow laws where?
No, I'm talking about laws of closing down of voting places, especially where poor people are voting, and making it hard where people are lined up for 2 hours to vote in areas, challenges to voting using technicalities to try to knock people off the ballot.
But Larry, let me ask you this: were you moved by the riot, by the footage that was shown last night? What was your take on that? I mean, it was footage we hadn't really seen before.
Ken, we saw all that footage before from different angles, from different.
No, there was some new footage.
No, there was some new video there.
I didn't see much that was new that I didn't see from other angles before. But again, why didn't they show this guy, Ray Epps, who was haranguing the crowd? Even if you want to say that he was one of the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, then present it. Show, this is guy he was clearly haranguing, agitating at the top of his lungs. Why wouldn't you show that? You see, this was selective editing to make their case. It wasn't an objective presentation. That's what I'm saying.
Well, what would an objective presentation? I mean, I wish we could see the entire thing from every angle. I don't know, though, that we would really see substantively anything different from what we saw.
I mean, Larry, it was a riot or an insurrection. What do you call it?
It certainly wasn't an insurrection.
What do you call it?
I call it a riot by a portion of the crowd that got out of hand, and I think they were also agitated. And some of them were out to do it to begin with, especially the extreme elements among the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. But
look, when you put a noose on a gallows and you say, Mike, we're coming to get you, that's pretty much over the line. It
is. I agree. But you're going to hang Trump with that noose? Did he put it there? Did he tell him to do that? Liz Cheney was talking about this 7-point plan, how it was all planned ahead of time, insinuating that Trump was behind all this planning. Baloney. There's no evidence of that.
Well, we don't know yet because there's more hearings to come.
Well, I'll be anxiously awaiting her so-called evidence. Now, what I would condemn Trump about, if these reports are accurate, is that when it was getting out of hand and he was told that he didn't call it off, he didn't start sending messages out to call off the crowd. If that is accurate, yeah, I agree with that. Trump should have done that. He waited too long to do that. I agree.
He was playing back portions of the group entering the Capitol, gleefully rewinding it, watching it again, back and forth and back and forth. Now that shows you what the mindset was. It does in my mind anyway.
Okay, as I said, if those reports are accurate and we still don't know that, we're only getting one side and people that are under pressure to testify, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Kent was asking me, am I upset by the rise? Sure I am. I said right from the beginning, Kent, when we were doing these broadcasts last year when it was happening, I said, it's awful and the people should be arrested. And they were, but a lot of that is being accepted now. And people who are just standing on the steps are suddenly insurrectionists being treated like terrorists. In terms of an insurrection is something people come with weapons. It's well planned. There's a real, genuine, serious attempt to overthrow the government. This was nothing like that.
But this was just a stupid insurrection. That's all.
It was a stupid riot. It
was poorly put together, but it was still nonetheless dangerous.
Right.
But yeah, it turned out to be dangerous. But by all traditional definitions of insurrection, as far as fall short of that, they keep pumping that up in insurrection. So this whole thing is being pumped up.
A radio station here, WAAM, it plays Alex Jones and these people day in and day out.
Yeah.
Right, I listened to them. They were planning and whipping up people to go to Washington for many, many days before the event. And even during the show, what they did is Alex Jones, I listened to them during the riot, insurrection, whatever you call it. Those people, Alex Jones turned it over to, they're not entirely stupid. They turned it over to front people to get right on the air. The people that they had got from Michigan to go, and they were directing them. It was like they were telling them, whipping them up to do something violent and promising them that the end would be that they would restore Donald Trump to office and keep this thing from being stolen to them. But let me go to this quote from Liz Cheney. As she said, "As you will see in great detail in these hearings, President Trump ignored the rulings of our nation's courts. He ignored his own campaign leadership, his White House staff, many Republican state officials. He ignored the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump invested millions of dollars of campaign funds purposely spreading false information, running ads he knew were false, and convincing millions of Americans that the election was corrupt and he was the true president. As you will see, this information campaign provoked the violence on January 6th. So now we'll get to see if the hearings, I think they started to show and to confirm these allegations. And I think more of the hearings will probably show this was the case, because I believe that's really what happened.
So you're saying that Trump's rhetoric is what led to the violence. He stirred up the crowd, so he is directly responsible for what happened.
He contributed to it.
Yeah,
he contributed to it.
I think, because they had people, they had seeded, and they were also funded. There are various powerful, rich, right-wing people who paid for an awful lot of preparations, and who give money to these radio mouthpieces all over the country, day in and day out. And they were pointing to this date. This was going to be when they got the presidency back for Trump.
All right. If you find that so egregious, Trump's rhetoric and all that, why do I hear none of you, and I hear none of the Democrats or most of the Republicans objecting to Trump, to Chuck Schumer going to the stairs of the Supreme Court saying, quote, "Listen to me, Gorsuch. Listen to me, Kavanaugh. You have loosed the whirlwind and you will reap the trouble. You won't know what hit you." That's not a big admirer.
I'm not a defender or admirer of Chuck Schumer, but fortunately, he's not president.
What I'm saying is, if you're going to hang Trump for stirring the crowd with his rhetoric, why are people silent on what Chuck Schumer did, the leader of the Senate?
Because they didn't create a riot.
Well, a guy tried to come to kill Kavanaugh just the other day. Now,
Well,
that's two different
come
events.
on. That's a lone nut, and we don't even know. He might even be a plant for all we know. You know, he turned himself in.
he could be
He went to the house. He was seen by the agents there in front of the house. He didn't walk to the house then. He walked away from it. And then he walked to a place, and then he called in and told them that he had a gun that wasn't loaded, and he was going to stand away from the gun, but that he had come to kill Kavanaugh. Okay. That's how he got caught, calling them in. So who knows what kind of a nut? Is he a Lee Harvey Oswald type plant nut or what? We don't know.
And why is Merrick Garland not enforcing the existing federal law that you can't demonstrate in front of the home of a justice with the intent to pressure or intimidate them? It's an existing law. He won't enforce it. All I'm saying is,
I think they should enforce it.
What I'm saying is this shows the hypocrisy of these people that are going after Trump. Equal application of the law. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Well, let's get the big goose first and then get these little goslings later. But, when the big goose is strutting around, goose stepping around the country.
That's right.
I think that goose needs to be got first. And I think an example made of Trump will be very helpful for the country.
I agree. Larry, what do you think about Fox then? Tell me about what you're thinking on Fox News and your lack of...
Well, first of all, I think they should have broadcast it, but
right.
Never said. And look, Ken, I've said all along that Fox has its own agenda and its own slant. That is true. The value of watching Fox, at least for me, is that among other sites, they get out stories that the other networks suppress for political reasons. Now, Fox has its own political reasons in presenting this, but at least they present stories that the other networks bury. Hunter Biden laptop, case in point, prime case in point. Before the election, they all squelched that story. The New York Times wouldn't go near it, any of the other mainstream media. Now, even the New York Times says, yeah, what's on there is genuine. And they're finally beginning to cover the story a year later after the election. The Kavanaugh thing, this guy allegedly attempting to assassinate Kavanaugh, that was buried on page 21 of the New York Times. So what I'm saying is Fox News has its own slant and agenda, but so does the other mainstream media.
Yeah, I agree. They do too. Yeah.
Yesterday morning, I watched Joe Scarborough on Morning Joe, and he had a 5 or 7 10-minute diatribe about what's happening on the border in terms of the number of people that are coming over now versus 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was. And there's no question that the concentration of that story by the right-wing media is finally beginning to show up in the more centrist media that he represents. And I think that a lot of times people are dragged kicking and screaming to the altar after it becomes apparent they can't come up with any more reasons to avoid it. So some of that ranting that you've been doing for the past 2 years may be accurate.
Ranting.
How much of it is accurate, I don't know. But it's beginning to show up in the mainstream media. And if indeed it turns out to be as flagrant as what you've been claiming all along, then obviously something's got to be done about it.
Well, Brian, I think what you would call my rants were fact-based. What I try to do is not take sides, but be objective. And, there is no doubt that the mainstream media is highly partisan, as I've said repeatedly. When we start out in journalism, the journalists always had their own slants. They always had their own thing, but they kept it pretty much in check. Now it's so blatant. There's no division anymore between what's supposed to be a straight news story and an editorial, that they become propagandists and cheerleaders rather than objective journalists. And that's being justified in terms of social justice. So where are we going to get the truth? Only from the government? This is what's going on. I mean, I don't see how
This is a different issue. I agree that there should, first of all, the notion that we should have open borders. You can't have a country if you don't if you have open borders. I mean, that it's you know, it's an opposite situation. You can't have it. You have to have your borders, and there has to be some way. I hear, I don't know, that they're letting people over the borders even who don't have vaccines or whatever. But also, let's look at, why are these people coming over to our borders? Why don't we then start looking at what's happened in their countries, and why are their countries so poor and desperate, with gangsters and crimes and military dictatorships, and they're in grim poverty, and they're just trying to get someplace where they can survive.
Well, the biggest offenders in the area south of the border are Nicaragua and Venezuela. You know, we know that, and Nicaragua represents the mainstay of most of those people who are trying to get into this country. We know that.
Guatemala, Salvador,
all of those repressive countries that are not even part of the Organization of American States. That they're not even being invited to come to it because of their antics in government. So,
well, I don't think that's why they're not being. I don't know what your take there is, but I would say that a lot of these countries have had their leadership controlled and dominated by super wealthy people and military people who have been under the thumb of the United States.
Yeah.
Some of them have, yes.
And they can't, if they try to get another government, it's overthrown by the United States.
It goes back to the United States exploiting South and Central America. And then after we had to withdraw through revolution or whatever, then there were their own corrupt people in power, and also supported by us. This is what happened in Cuba. You know, with the United Fruit Company, the mafia, you know, people who got the gravy were the well-connected people, the upper class and the American businessmen. The peasants were thrown aside. So they were hungry for somebody like Castro to come in. And now, you know, to their regret. But yeah, I mean, if you want to go back far enough, it's basically the fault of the U.S. for
we control it.
Yeah. So
we own it, you know.
But, you know, here's another, and don't forget, you know, why is Biden allowing the border to be wide open, despite what Mayorkas says, that, oh, you know, there's no problem? Because, you know, it seems like they want to turn them into Democratic voters. Because
I don't doubt that that's a motive. I don't.
First of all, they're not going to be able to vote for many years.
Well, they're already working on that, as you know, in several states. Non-citizens can already vote in local and state elections, so that's already in process. So, yeah, what possible reason is to let droves of people over, unvaccinated, unchecked? Now, most of them are just looking for a better life. I understand that. But it's also being mixed in with drug cartels, with human trafficking, and with fentanyl. That's in every state now. And Biden's letting this wide in. Why? Justify that.
Can't justify that. I don't justify that. But that's a separate. It's all linked, as far as you might say. The country is in deep doo-doo between the Democrats and the Republicans. We got bad leadership.
Again, what I've been saying all along since we started these podcasts is that both sides are corrupt. I'm not taking one side or the other. Both sides.
You know what, Larry? They may be corrupt, but the Republicans leave little doubt about what their plans are. The Democrats are a little more hard to dissect and find out what's really driving.
I would like to see better Republicans emerge, and that's why I'm glad to see Cheney, because I'm hoping that the ultra wacko type Republicans will be sidelined and limited, and there will be some emergence there of more sane people. And the same goes with the Democrats.
Well, you know, the thing with the
what
Republicans,
what Trump has represented is the worst. Is, you know,
the worst of that's exactly right. That's exactly right. The whole problem with getting people to think before they go in the voting booth is not a new issue. It's very hard to get people to think and vote issues when they go in the voting booth. They vote the party. They vote a narrow political philosophy. They do anything but look at the entire specter of what that candidate represents.
But my overall point has been that there's such hypocrisy on both sides that I find it extremely distasteful to hear Liz Cheney on her high horse. You know, she's the one who's so concerned about preserving democracy and the American way and all that baloney. But yeah, both sides are so corrupt. But Kent has a prediction for us. So let us have it. Who's going to be the next president, Kent?
No, that's what I'm saying. I think Cheney is setting herself up for a run for the presidency. I think even if she gets primaried or loses in her home state, it's not going to matter. And I think we're going to have and as a Democrat, I'm really worried, but I think we're going to have a Cheney, probably Romney ticket for the Republicans. I think at some point at the end of June, at the end of this month, Trump is going to be so wounded. And indeed, I think there are two I think the DOJ is going to be forced to charge him, just the way, if you notice how last night, I mean, Cheney kept saying it was illegal, it was illegal, it was illegal.
It's clear they're leading up to that, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, so they're leading up to that. And I think the Republicans are going to realize that we have to drop Trump, although, because they realize even if every Trump voter or supporter voted for him, I mean, he has to broaden his base to win the presidency again. And I think the Republicans are going to realize that that cannot happen, and they're going to dump him, and he's not going to run, and they're going to, go somewhere else.
All right, Ken, what about all the polls showing now that Biden is tanking Democrats in general, and what's going to happen in the midterms? Is it going to be a red wave, tsunami, or what?
Well, I don't know, but I'm saying that's why I say I'm worried. I think if it were a Cheney Romney ticket, let's say, going against Biden and Kamala Harris, I mean, I think Cheney would probably win.
Brian, what do you think?
Well, look, we haven't seen, despite all of this hubbub that's been going on with the Supreme Court decision, with all of the shootings, with all of this stuff that's now being unveiled on Capitol Hill, the polls in the primaries are not moving. Nobody's taken off like a jet. So I'm not so sure that either party is going to have a groundswell of support based on what I've seen so far. If Trump is indicted, if Trump is charged with a crime, that changes the whole ball game, because Republicans will then have to scramble to get somebody else to head the ticket. So there's a lot of unplayed cards here yet.
I wish we had a leader emerge who, from any source, who was able to lessen the hatred and vitriol between people with different political opinions in the country. Because I think that if we keep having this highly factionalized, very friction and intolerant kind of politics in our country, then our country is really going to transmogrify. And
well,
I mean, it's on its way now. And so right. I don't know where that person is or who or how it emerges, because I don't see any organizations producing such types of politicians, really, unfortunately. But I would be happy to see such a person with a movement or organization emerge, because otherwise we're headed for disaster.
I think what you've hit the nail on the head in terms of political discourse. But in my partisan moment here, I will just say this. Republicans, since Reagan took office, have had this grand philosophy of let's sit and negotiate. And their definition of negotiate is do it our way. And they've gotten away with that for years with voters. They've tricked them for years. And I'm hoping that the public comes to its senses at some point and says, yeah, but what have you given us for all this stuff?
Well, they're giving them wars and more wars. And
that's what I'm saying.
And unfortunately, the Democrats are, the war Democrats seem to be in control of their party. and they have this habit now of trying to squelch dissent from their policies and cut people off off these internet, whatever you call them, high tech groups, and accuse any opponent of being Putin defenders and all of this. So that's the kind of game that they're playing. So it's really a bad scene all the way around, that people aren't being given facts, and people are not being accustomed to higher levels of debate by the politicians. The politicians seem to want to stimulate, responses, emotional responses based on nothing. It's like a PR advertising campaign. It's a very bad situation. I mean, this thing with, Biden and Harris, I don't admire either one of them. I don't know whoever the Democratic Central Committee people are selecting and controlling their party, their high offices, and they seem to be picking a lot of bad people all over the country, and they have better people among them. They have better possible candidates, but they don't emerge. And then the Democrats are, I just think this war economy that's being foisted on the country as a whole, the country can't put its wealth into all this war making and replenishing the arsenal. The masses of the people in the country are going to go down the tubes, and they're going to be desperate, they're going to be insecure, they're going to be hostile, and they're going to be bait for all sorts of madness.
Now, John, do you see a big recession coming and all kinds of crises along those lines, or Kent feels that it's going to be turned around by the time the midterms, and certainly by 2024?
I don't see how it can be with resources going the way they're going. I mean, I don't see, for regular Americans, I don't see education, housing, transportation, and all that. I don't see education, particularly also. I don't see it being regenerated, revived. So where's the energy, the wealth, where's it going to come from? I don't know. Our school systems are just they're circling the drain, the public school systems.
Or Ken, you think it will turn around?
I think he will. I mean, I think it'll be turned around politically anyway. I'm not sure. Again, the issues that John talks about are very complicated and very difficult to settle. But
we really had a New Deal. We had a Build Back Better, but he makes the phrase "Build Back Better."
Right.
But he didn't. But when it comes to the rubber hitting the road, none of the projects.
Well, you had two jerks in the Senate stop it in its tracks. So that was the end of that.
Well, I don't think he comes up with programs that are doable. I don't think I don't think they even have a plan for Build Back Better. It's just the words, just phrasing. I don't see a plan for it.
Well, Ken, you say the Saudi Arabia deal, they're going to turn on the spigot and gas prices will go down appreciably, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, and again, that'll be a political solution. I mean, again, Biden will be going back on one of his campaign promises, which was to treat the Saudis as pariahs because of what they did to Khashoggi and the journalists. So he'll be going back on that promise, but politically, he'll be meeting with the Saudis to get them to, as you say, open the oil spigots. And so oil prices will go down. I think he'll end up doing something with the student loan situation. That'll give him some political fodder. And I think he'll do something probably with the border. So, I mean, I think in the short term, politically, I think he can, his administration can do some things. But what I fear is a Cheney plus somebody, Romney probably ticket that would really, I think, get some Democrats and even get a fair number of Republicans to abandon Trump. And I think he's going to eventually either be charged. If he's charged, he's not going to run. And I think he might even decide not to run after the hearings.
Here's my question.
Yeah.
Why is it that we have oil at $120 a barrel when there's no supply shortage anywhere? You can buy all the gas you want. All you got to do is pay for it. the first thing that usually happens when oil prices spike is because of a shortage in supply. We don't have a shortage. There's no gas lines anywhere. Why is it that these types of price hikes, unprecedented price hikes in oil, have been allowed to go on and on and on, when the only result is to embarrass the government that has control of the power right now, and that's the Democrats.
Right, you're saying, Brian, essentially that this is price.
The oil companies.
That this is price gouging.
I think there's no doubt that the end game here is to get rid of the Democrats,
Okay,
Biden and the Congress.
So why when Trump was in office and gas prices really dipped quite a bit, how come these evil corporations and gas producers weren't able to keep the prices up for their own benefit?
They detest Biden. They detest the Democrats. Every time a Democrat has gotten in office since Reagan, actually even before, when Carter was president, anytime a Democrat has gotten in office, they've started with the sugar. We have a sugar shortage. Let's try that with oil. And they got away with it. And it kept going and going and going. And anytime we got a Democrat in the White House, they revved it up again and drove up those prices and eventually drove the Democrats from power. It's axiomatic.
Okay, you know what we should do is agree now for our next podcast. Let's include Mark Collinsworth, our financial expert, who has quite a bit of knowledge about how markets work and whether you could really trace it to price gouging. So that could be more interesting for our next podcast. So shall we do that?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, maybe so. I think that Clinton, the rich people liked it when Clinton was in. He had a very successful because he went along with the corporate interests.
Yeah.
And there was a Democrat who I can remember when I think I was just coming to the university. All the professors at the university whose TIAA CREF is what they put their money in for your pensions, or whether it's for your wealth planning. They were so happy. Clinton had made them all very wealthy, through his 2 terms, and they were all able to retire and live like, kings, thanks to those policies. But those were, you might say, state capitalism policies that panned out. So they liked that. But I think now we're in a case where a lot of this oil and stuff now, since they didn't want Russia to be able to put those pipelines through to Germany, they have to supply a lot of different markets that they weren't supplying before in order to crush the Russians. And we're the ones that are going to pay for it. We're paying for it. They're going to.
And you know what? If we completed the Keystone Pipeline tomorrow, it wouldn't make one bit of difference in the price of oil.
I'm talking about I'm talking about the one from Russia into Germany.
I know that, but all I'm saying is that people use that excuse to hammer Biden.
Look, we know the oil companies will go to any lengths to preserve their power. They don't care what wars spark here or there. And I don't know who makes the policy in our country, but I'm sure that it's not Biden and Kamala Harris.
Right. Well, I bought gas today up here in upstate New York. It was $4.99.
Around my area near Scranton, Pennsylvania, regular is now $5.09 or higher.
Whoa.
In Philadelphia, much higher than that. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
They peg it for whatever the traffic will bear.
Diesel, I'm paying like $6.50 a gallon for diesel for my lawn tractors. Now truckers, everything moves. I guess 70% or more of in this country move by trucks. Diesel. So we're going from there. But
well, at any rate, I think our initial conversation here this evening was about the hearings, and I think next week, Monday, when there's another hearing, and they haven't. Keep in mind, they haven't even set the agendas for all the hearings yet, only for the next 2.
Yeah. Well, I'm waiting to hear Liz Cheney lay out the 7 points where Trump was behind all the plans.
I hope they lay them out, because I don't think that Trump is the person to actually unite the country and make it a better place. And I don't think Biden and Harris are either. So I'm still waiting for the man or woman on the white horse to come galloping from somewhere. I don't know where they're going to be coming from.
Yeah, that's right.
Last words, all of us. Do you have any particular person, champion, that you think could pull the country together? And anybody, you know, in on the sidelines that should come forward or might be brought forward? Can you think of anybody?
That governor or senator from Montana, I kind of liked him, that Democrat that was there in Montana. I heard, and then there's a woman from either South or North Dakota. I heard her. She was a very sensible person who can go talk to regular people and not talk over their heads and not be sneering. So I think there's some more people. There was some guy in Ohio. I think he sounded fairly like a sane, rational person. But unfortunately, the Democrat Central Committee does not seem to be advancing the careers of such people. They've got these Washington, New York area.
Yeah, it's Northeast liberals. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't.
Well, I still think Cheney's going to do it. I think Cheney can will end up doing it.
I want a regular, a rational, decent kind of person, reasonable kind of person. They can think other things differently than I do on many points, but just kind of like a sane, good-hearted kind of person. Isn't there some such person someplace?
But you know what? They got to be able to win, and that's the big wrinkle right there.
I think they could if they could get any airtime and get promoted by, you know, once the Madison Avenue types people take over, they can polish anybody up and sell them.
Yeah.
All right, so Larry, I think you should announce.
How about you, Larry? You see anybody?
Other than myself, or were you presenting?
Yeah, right.
I mean,
well, you know, one of my favorite from the last time when in 2020 during the primaries, Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm not
the
sure.
only thing about Tulsi that kind of disappointed me was she, I don't know what her religious thing is, but she kind of was supporting Modi a little bit too much because of some kind of Hindu things she had working there. But for on many topics, she was good. You know that one who lost her legs in the war, who's in Illinois.
Tammy Duckworth.
She's a good kind of person. I think she's a level-headed kind of person too.
Well, we had one handicapped president. I mean, and that was kept a secret for years.
George W. Bush.
So, you know, who knows? And,
I don't know.
Abbott in Texas is in a wheelchair.
The guys down there, the twins down there in Arizona or wherever they are, one of those guys that I thought he was a pretty good guy. What's his name? You know, those Mexican twins? One of them ran for president.
I know who you mean. Yeah, right. I can't remember the name.
But he seemed to be a decent level-headed guy with his feet on the floor and personable and kind.
The fact that none of us can really name.
I know that. Yeah, I know.
Except Cheney, right? Of course.
It's a problem.
This shows you how hard it's going to be for any one candidate to have voters coalesce around him or her.
Oops.
That shows you right there.
That's
all right, guys. Thank you very much for your.
All right. See you next time.
All right, we'll have some. You know, the other hearings may produce things that preempt the other topic too. We don't know.
That's right.
Keep an open mind.
That's exactly
I know you do.
We'll be back for that one definitely, and also the next time before that, hopefully with Mark Collins, we're talking about whether price gouging is really behind all the rise.
Oh, that would be good to find out.
Yeah. Okay. So, guys, thanks very much for joining.
All right. See ya.
All right.
John Woodford, Bryant Thomas, myself, Larry Sparano, on target with Larry Sparano. Thank everybody out there for bearing with us, and we'll see you again soon. Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Night.